Support for Radio Friends comes from La Brunerie Financial, where they work to ensure a lifetime of financial security for people from all walks of life, from investment services to retirement plans. If you're looking for a trustworthy company that has the experience and knowledge to put your interests first, contact La Brunerie Financial, a community-based investment counseling firm since 1966. Good morning and welcome to Radio Friends on Tuesday, October the 20th. We're going to talk about something that is going to affect each and every one of us. There is no escaping it. It's going to affect us, and that's dying. And wait, now don't be turned off by this, and don't turn the radio off. But it's something that we have to think about from time to time, and it's not a gruesome subject either. It is a part of life. Just as sure as being born at one point, this life is going to come to an end. We're going to pass on to the next life. And I've got Mickey Havner with us here, who is an end-of-life doula. And you were on a couple of months ago. We were talking about this. And she is having what are called death cafes. Some people are like, what is a death cafe? You've already had one.
We've
right?
had one
and
online.
It was very successful.
Yes.
And it was very inspiring. It was very uplifting, right?
And comforting.
Comforting. So
Yes.
what is a death cafe?
A death cafe is an opportunity to talk about death without any agenda, no parameters, ask questions, tell your stories, just kind of get used to talking about death.
You know, in our society, for some reason, we have this stigma. We don't want to talk about death. And it seems like we will avoid it to the ultimate. Nobody wants to think about dying and the end of our life. And you want to try to stay alive at all costs. Well, that's not what life is. Life does come to an end at one point.
Yes.
And the older you get, the more you realize that, well, like with me, okay, I'm 75, and I got to come to grips here that I've got more days behind me than I have ahead of me right now. And there's nothing you can do about it. I'm not ready to jump in the grave, but I know it's at one point it's going to come, and the best thing to do is be prepared for it.
Exactly. Every family needs to have the talk.
Yeah.
And it's very hard when you try and talk to your children about your death or your arrangements. Generally speaking,
The kids don't want to talk about
they
it.
don't want to talk about it.
No.
On the other hand, sometimes adults don't. So kids want to know, where do you want to be buried? Have you made any arrangements? And sometimes parents are reluctant to talk about it.
Yeah. You know, I tell you this story. Many years ago, because when I grew up, we always went to visit our relatives' graves at the cemetery.
We still do.
Yeah,
And
that was
kids.
a ritual. We went to the cemetery and we went to the graves and put flowers and paid a visit. I remember I was living in Columbia and I'd gone home to visit my mother and father. And on the way back to Columbia, I stopped at the cemetery where my grandmother and grandfather were buried. And as I'm driving out, they were buried at St. Peter and Paul's Cemetery in St. Louis. I'm driving out, and here is the, what do you call them, the crypt, the above ground burials.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mausoleum.
for some reason, I looked over and I saw John Ersey and Marie Ersey. That's my mother and father. I saw their names on the crypt. And I got home and I called them and I said, what did you do? I just came from the cemetery and I saw your name. So, well, we were going to tell you, but we thought we'd hold off. We bought our plots. We're ready. And your father didn't want to be in the ground. He wanted to be above the ground in one of the crypts. That was a shock to me.
Of course.
That they had done that. But then I realized, that's good. That's good. And then when the time came, it was a lot easier to deal with it because they had made decisions.
Of course. If people plan ahead, make those decisions, then their children don't have to make decisions under great stress.
Right.
When my father died, we went to the funeral home, and the undertaker, who had been there for years, said, let's go to the casket selection room. So we did. And he said, now these are your everyday Social Security caskets. But of course, you're going to want something nicer for your dad. And so, my mother fell right into it, and my dad had something nicer.
Yeah, just the plain Social Security caskets are good enough.
Right.
They're good enough. But the thing is, with the Death Cafe, you not only talk about making those arrangements, but you talk about emotionally. How do you handle it when someone close to you is close to the end? How do you accept it? And how does the person who is going to be passing on accept it?
Well, I have some wonderful printed material that I share with people. I didn't write it, but it's very good material, and it talks about the last 24 hours, what to expect. It talks about living your best life once you've been diagnosed with a terminal illness. Some people, once they put you on the hospice, it's going to be 24 hours and you're going to be gone. But I had a patient one time who lived for 8 years on hospice. And
right.
It gave us a chance to do a lot of things.
Yes, I know. Because you're supposedly, when you're on hospice, you're supposed to have only about 6 months left.
Right.
But I remember Dr. Moscato, who is just an absolutely wonderful oncologist, when my mother was on hospice, and he said, I've had people who've gone on hospice, and 2 or 3 or 4 years later, they're still with us. So you never know. You don't know when your time is coming.
Right, right.
And we just need to, and many times it's more difficult on the people who are going to be left behind, and the person who is dying is more concerned about the loved ones that they're leaving behind than they are themselves.
Right, exactly.
And is this what you deal with the Death Cafe?
Yes, we deal with anything anybody wants to talk about.
You know what? We're out of time, Mickey. But if people want more information about end-of-life doula, what can they do? They
can call me 573-808-5541.
Okay.
And I do a 30-minute free consult.
Okay, so that's 573-808-5541. Remember, it is something that we need to think about. We don't need to dwell on it. You don't need to dwell on it, but you need to think about it, and you need to be open enough to talk about it, because it's something that we are all we're going to walk that walk at one time or another. Mickey, thank you so much for coming by.
You're welcome.
All right. Out of time, drop me an email, pepperp@missouri.edu.